The horse's hooves thundered into Lone Pine, Nevada, just as the sun began its descent behind the jagged peaks of the Sierra Nevada, and the woman atop the beast looked as though she had ridden straight out of hell itself. Dust clung to every inch of her body. Her auburn hair whipped loose from its braid and tangled with dried sweat and dirt. Her green eyes wild with a terror so profound that folks stepped back from the boardwalk as she passed. The mare beneath her was lathered white, its flanks heaving, foam dripping from its mouth. This was not the leisurely pace of a traveler, but the desperate flight of prey. Franklin Garrett was mending a fence post outside the general store when he first saw her. His hands stilled on the hammer, his eyes tracking her movement down the main street with the practiced assessment of a man who had seen trouble in many forms during his 28 years. He had been a ranch hand, a deputy for a brief spell, and now worked odd jobs around town while he saved enough to buy his own piece of land. What he saw in that moment made his gut clench with recognition. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of soldiers returning from battles they would never speak of, in the faces of women who had survived things no one should survive. The woman pulled her horse to a stumbling halt in front of the sheriff's office, nearly falling from the saddle in her haste to dismount. Her legs buckled when her boots hit the ground, and she caught herself on the hitching post with trembling hands. Franklin dropped his hammer and started walking toward her, his long strides eating up the distance. "Miss," he called out, keeping his voice calm and low. "Miss, are you hurt?" She spun to face him, and he saw the tracks tears had carved through the dust on her cheeks. Her dress, once a pale blue calico, was torn at the sleeve and stained with what might have been blood. When she opened her mouth to speak, only a ragged gasp emerged. "Easy now," Franklin said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Let me help you. What happened?" "He is coming," she managed, her voice hoarse as if she had been screaming. "He will find me. He always finds me." Franklin glanced back down the road she had traveled, seeing nothing but the empty expanse of sagebrush and desert stretching toward the mountains. "Who is coming?" "My husband." She spat the word like poison. "Richard Benson. He will kill me this time, I know he will." The door to the sheriff's office swung open and Sheriff Tom Morrison stepped out, his weathered face creasing with concern. He was a good man, fair and steady, though getting on in years. "What is all this commotion?" Franklin looked at the sheriff, then back at the woman who was now swaying on her feet. "She needs help, Tom. Says someone is after her." "He is a monster," the woman whispered, and then her eyes rolled back and she crumpled. Franklin lunged forward and caught her before she hit the ground, surprised by how light she was, how fragile she felt in his arms despite the strength it must have taken to ride as hard as she had. "Get her inside," Sheriff Morrison ordered, holding the door wide. "Fetch Doc Brennan." Franklin carried her into the office and laid her carefully on the worn leather sofa against the wall. Her head lolled to the side, revealing bruises on her neck in the distinct shape of fingers. His jaw tightened as rage, swift and hot, surged through him. He had grown up watching his father treat his mother with gentleness and respect, and the sight of a man's violence marked on a woman's skin made him want to hit something. Young Billy Carter, the deputy, scrambled out to find the doctor while Franklin knelt beside the sofa. The woman's breathing was shallow but steady. He noticed more details now, things that painted a grim picture. Her wrists bore the faded yellow-green of old bruises. There was a healing cut above her left eyebrow. This had not been a single incident but a pattern, a long nightmare she had been living. "Who is Richard Benson?" Sheriff Morrison asked, moving to the window to watch the street. "Her husband," she said. Franklin replied without taking his eyes off the unconscious woman. "Said he was coming for her." "Well, If he shows his face in my town and has done this to her, he will answer for it," the sheriff said grimly. Doc Brennan arrived within minutes, his medical bag in hand and his expression set in the practiced neutrality of a man who had seen humanity at its worst. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and steady hands that had delivered babies and extracted bullets with equal skill. "Everyone out except Tom," he said, kneeling beside the sofa. "Give her some dignity while I examine her." Franklin reluctantly stepped outside into the gathering dusk. The main street of Lone Pine was quiet now, most folks heading home for supper. The town was small, maybe 300 souls, serving the scattered ranches and mining claims in the area. It had a hotel, 2 saloons, the general store, a blacksmith, and not much else. People here minded their own business mostly, but news traveled fast in small places. He found himself pacing, unable to shake the image of her terror-stricken face. He did not even know her name. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 minutes, Doc Brennan emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. "How is she?" Franklin asked immediately. "Dehydrated, exhausted, and bearing the marks of repeated abuse," the doc said quietly, his eyes hard. "But nothing broken this time, thank God. She will need rest, food, and water, and protection if what she says is true." "It is true," Franklin said with absolute certainty. "You saw the bruises." Doc Brennan nodded. "That I did. She is waking up now. Tom is talking to her." Franklin waited, though every instinct screamed at him to go back inside. What was this woman to him? A stranger who had ridden into town an hour ago. Yet something in him had shifted the moment he caught her, some fundamental reordering of priorities he did not fully understand. The door opened and Sheriff Morrison stepped out. "Her name is Abigail Brenner. Says she was Abigail Benson but is taking back her maiden name as of today. She is from Virginia City, married Richard Benson 2 years ago. According to her, he is a mine owner with money and connections, and he has been beating her since 3 months into their marriage." "Virginia City is not that far," Franklin said. Virginia City, Nevada, was less than 100 miles north, a booming silver town full of wealth and vice. "If he has resources, he will come looking. That is what she fears. Says she finally escaped 4 days ago while he was away on business, took a horse and what money she could find and has been riding hard ever since." The sheriff's expression was troubled. "Problem is, we do not have any law against a man retrieving his wife. Technically, she is still his property in the eyes of most courts." "That is not right," Franklin said flatly. "I agree, son, but that is the reality. Unless we can prove he is a danger to her life, my hands are tied." "The bruises are not proof enough. She would have to testify in court and he would have lawyers. It would be her word against his, and he is a man of means." Sheriff Morrison rubbed his face wearily. "I have seen how these things go. The law is not kind to women trying to leave their husbands." Franklin felt that rage building again. "So what do? We keep her safe as best we can. She can stay at the hotel for tonight. Martha will look after her." Martha Holloway ran the hotel with her husband, and she was the motherly sort who would not stand for any nonsense. "I will pay for her room," Franklin heard himself say. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "That is generous of you." "It is the right thing to do." Franklin met his gaze steadily. "And I will keep watch tonight, make sure no one bothers her. Suit yourself, but son, do not go getting too involved. This could get complicated." Too late for that, Franklin thought but did not say aloud. They moved Abigail to the hotel once she was strong enough to walk with support. Martha Holloway took one look at her and immediately swept into action, ordering hot water for a bath and a tray of food sent up to the room. Franklin carried Abigail's small traveling bag, which was pitifully light, containing little more than a change of clothes and a few personal items. "Thank you," Abigail said to him as they reached the door to her room. Her voice was still rough, but her eyes were clearer now. "You have been very kind, Mr. Franklin Garrett. Just Franklin is fine." "Thank you, Franklin." She managed a small, fragile smile. "I am Abigail." "Get some rest, Miss Abigail. You are safe here." "Am I?" The fear crept back into her eyes. "He will come. He will not let me go. I am his possession, something he owns." "You are a human being and you have the right to live without fear," Franklin said firmly. "I do not care what the law says. While you are in Lone Pine, I will make sure you are safe." Something flickered in her expression, a fragile hope mixed with disbelief, as if kindness was so foreign to her experience that she could not quite trust it. "Why would you do that? You do not know me." "I know enough." He tipped his hat to her. "Good night, Miss Abigail." He took up position in a chair in the hotel lobby, much to Martha's amusement. "You planning to sleep there, Franklin Garrett?" "Just keeping an eye out, Miss Martha." "She really got to you, did she?" Martha's eyes were knowing but kind. "That girl has been through hell. I could see it in her eyes." "Yes, madam." "Well, you are a good man. Your mama raised you right." She patted his shoulder and left him to his vigil. The night passed slowly. Franklin dozed in fits and starts, jerking awake at every creak of the floorboards or gust of wind against the windows. By the time dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, he was stiff and sore but relieved. No one had come for Abigail during the night. He was stretching the kinks out of his back when he heard footsteps on the stairs. Abigail descended slowly, wearing a clean dress that Martha must have lent her. Her hair was brushed and pinned up neatly, and though she still looked exhausted, the wild terror had faded to a wary watchfulness. "You stayed," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I said I would. Men do not usually keep their word, not in my experience." "Then your experience has been with the wrong sort of men." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to puzzle him out. "May I ask you something, Franklin?" "Why are you helping me?" "The truth, please." Franklin considered his answer carefully. "I saw my mother once when I was about 10 years old with a bruise on her face. One of the ranch hands who worked for my father had gotten drunk and struck her when she told him to get out of the kitchen. My father found out and knocked that man flat, then ran him off the property. He told me that day that a real man protects those who cannot protect themselves, and that any man who raises his hand to a woman is no man at all. I have carried that with me ever since." Abigail's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Your father sounds like a good man. He died 6 years ago. Fever took him and Mama both that winter." The old grief was a dull ache now, worn smooth by time. "I am sorry." "Me too." He cleared his throat. "Are you hungry?" "Martha makes a fine breakfast." They ate together in the hotel dining room, and Franklin noticed how Abigail seemed to relax slightly in his presence. She told him more of her story between bites of eggs and biscuits. She was 23 years old, originally from a small town in Missouri. Her parents had died when she was young, and she had been raised by an aunt who saw her more as a burden than a blessing. When Richard Benson had come through town, wealthy and charming, and asked for her hand, her aunt had practically pushed her into the marriage. "He was different at first," Abigail said quietly, staring at her coffee. "Or maybe I just wanted to believe he was. He could be so kind when he wanted something. But after the wedding, after I was legally bound to him, the mask came off. The first time he hit me, he cried afterward and swore it would never happen again. I believed him." "But it did happen again," Franklin said gently. "Again and again. Each time worse than the last. He said I provoked him, that I was ungrateful, that I should be thankful any man would want me." Her voice hardened. "I started to believe it. That is what frightened me most, how I began to think he was right, that I deserved it. You did not deserve any of it. I know that now, or at least I am trying to know it." She looked up at him, and he saw steel beneath the fear. "He almost killed me 2 weeks ago. Choked me until I could not breathe, until I saw spots dancing in my vision. When he finally let go, I realized that if I stayed, he would eventually succeed. So I started planning, hiding money, gathering supplies. And then 4 days ago, an opportunity came. He left for Carson City on business. I took one of the horses and everything I could carry, and I rode. I rode like the devil himself was after me." "He might as well have been," Franklin said. "The worst part is not knowing when he will find me. Not if, but when. He will track me down. He is a proud man, and I have injured that pride by leaving. He will want to punish me for it. Then we will have to make sure you are ready when he comes." "Ready how?" Franklin leaned forward. "Can you shoot?" She blinked. No, my aunt thought guns were unladylike." "Unladylike does not matter much when your life is at stake. If you are willing, I can teach you. And we can talk to Sheriff Morrison about legal options. Maybe there is a way to file for divorce or get some kind of protective order." "In Nevada?" Abigail let out a bitter laugh. "This territory has only allowed divorce for a few years, and even then, you need to prove adultery or extreme cruelty in court. Richard has friends, judges, and lawyers on his payroll. I would never win." "Maybe not in court," Franklin conceded, "but there are other ways to fight back. Ways to make it clear that you are not going back to him, no matter what." Something kindled in Abigail's eyes, a spark of defiance that had probably kept her alive through 2 years of hell. "Teach me to shoot." They spent the morning on the outskirts of town, Franklin setting up tin cans on fence posts while Abigail held his pistol with shaking hands. It was a Colt revolver, well-maintained and reliable. He showed her how to load it, how to aim, how to breathe and squeeze the trigger rather than pull it. The first shot went wild, kicking up dust 20 feet from the target. Abigail flinched at the recoil, but Franklin saw determination set her jaw. "Again," she said. By the time the sun was high overhead, she had managed to hit 3 cans out of 12 attempts. Not great, but better than nothing. Her hands had stopped shaking, and she held the gun with more confidence. "You did well," Franklin told her as they walked back to town. "I missed most of them. But you hit some, and more importantly, you did not give up. That is what matters." She smiled at him, a real smile this time, and Franklin felt something shift in his chest. She was beautiful, he realized, not just in features but in spirit. The courage it must have taken to run, to keep fighting when everything in her world told her she had no power, no options. She was extraordinary. Over the next few days, they fell into a pattern. Franklin continued his odd jobs around town but made sure to check on Abigail regularly. They practiced shooting every morning. In the afternoons, she helped Martha at the hotel, insisting she needed to earn her keep. Martha was teaching her to bake, and the hotel started to smell like fresh bread and apple pie. Franklin found himself inventing reasons to stop by, to linger in conversation. He learned that Abigail loved to read, but had rarely been allowed books during her marriage. He brought her a copy of Little Women from the general store, and her face lit up like Christmas morning. "I have wanted to read this," she said, clutching the book to her chest. "Thank you." "It is just a book," he said, embarrassed by her gratitude. "No, it is not. It is kindness. It is seeing me as a person, not a thing to be controlled. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" He did not. Not really. But he was beginning to understand the depth of what she had endured and the profound effect that simple decency had on someone who had been denied it for so long. On the 5th day after her arrival, everything changed. Franklin was repairing a broken wagon wheel behind the livery stable when he heard the commotion. Horses, multiple riders, coming hard into town. His heart sank even before he rounded the building and saw them. 6 men on horseback, all well-dressed and well-armed, led by a man who could only be Richard Benson. Benson was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair slicked back and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a fine suit, and a gold watch chain glinted at his vest. His face was handsome in a cold, sharp way, like a knife blade. He looked like prosperity and success, exactly the kind of man people would respect and believe. "Where is the sheriff?" Benson's voice carried across the street, cultured and commanding. Sheriff Morrison emerged from his office, moving with deliberate calm. "I am Sheriff Morrison. What can I do for you gentlemen?" "I am Richard Benson from Virginia City, and I am looking for my wife. I have reason to believe she came through this town. Abigail Benson, auburn hair, green eyes, about this tall." He held his hand at shoulder height. "She is not well, suffers from delusions and hysteria. I am very worried about her." Franklin felt his hands curl into fists. The smooth lie, delivered with such conviction, was masterful. Benson was painting himself as the concerned husband and Abigail as a madwoman who could not be trusted. "Well now," Sheriff Morrison said slowly, "there might be a woman matching that description staying at the hotel. But before I go disturbing any guests, maybe you can tell me why you think your wife would run from you in the first place." Benson's expression flickered, annoyance breaking through the facade before he smoothed it away. "As I said, she is unwell. She has spells where she does not know what she is doing. I have been looking for her for days, frantic with worry. I simply want to take her home where she can receive proper care." "That is a lie." Every head turned. Abigail stood on the hotel porch, having emerged from inside. She was pale but steady, her chin lifted in defiance. Franklin started moving toward her instinctively. "Abigail, darling," Benson said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "Thank God I found you. You have led me on quite a chase. Come now, let us go home." "I am not going anywhere with you," Abigail said clearly. "I am not your wife anymore. I want a divorce." Benson's face darkened. "You do not know what you are saying. You are confused. I am perfectly clear. You beat me, Richard. You choked me. You told me you would kill me if I ever tried to leave, and I believe you meant it. So I left anyway." A murmur ran through the growing crowd of townspeople. Benson glanced around, clearly aware of the audience, and forced a pained smile. "Sheriff, you can see she is hysterical. I need to take her home for her own good." "The lady says she does not want to go with you," Sheriff Morrison said, "and I see bruises on her neck that tell me maybe she has good reason." "Those are from a fall," Benson snapped, losing patience. "She is clumsy, always has been. Now stop interfering in a private family matter and let me take my wife home." "No," Abigail's voice rang out. "I am staying here." Benson's mask finally cracked completely. His face contorted with rage, and he swung down from his horse with violence in every movement. "You little—" Franklin stepped between them, his hand hovering near his gun. "That is far enough." Benson pulled up short, his eyes raking over Franklin with contempt. "And who are you?" "Someone who does not take kindly to men who hurt women." "This is none of your business, Cowboy." "That is my wife, and I have every legal right to take her home." "Maybe legally," Sheriff Morrison interjected, moving to stand beside Franklin. "But I have the right to keep the peace in my town, and right now the peace looks like you leaving Miss Abigail alone." "Miss Abigail?" Benson's laugh was ugly. "She is Mrs. Benson, whether she likes it or not. We are married before God and the law." "Before God, maybe," Franklin said quietly, "but God does not beat women." One of Benson's men shifted in his saddle, hand moving toward his gun. Instantly, Sheriff Morrison's deputies materialized, including young Billy Carter with a shotgun. The tension ratcheted up to a breaking point. "Gentlemen," the sheriff said calmly, I suggest you ride on out of Lone Pine before this gets ugly." Benson's eyes burned with fury, but he was not stupid enough to start a gunfight he might not win. "This is not over. She is my wife. I will get a court order, come back with legal authority. You cannot keep her from me." "Maybe," Morrison agreed, "but that is a problem for another day. Today, I am asking you to leave." For a long moment, Franklin thought Benson might try something anyway. He could see the calculation in the man's eyes, weighing options. But finally, Benson stepped back, smoothing his suit jacket. "You have made a powerful enemy today, Sheriff," he said coldly. "I have friends in Carson City. We will see how long you keep that badge." "I will worry about my badge. You worry about riding out before sundown." Benson turned his gaze to Abigail, who stood frozen on the porch. "I will be back for you. You belong to me. You might have fooled these yokels with your sob story, but I know the truth. You are nothing without me. No one will want you. You will come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, and when you do, you will regret ever running from me." "I would rather die," Abigail said softly, but every word carried. "I would rather die free than live one more day as your prisoner." Something terrifying flashed across Benson's face, a promise of violence so profound that Franklin's hand moved to his gun. But then Benson smiled, cold and cruel. "That can be arranged." He swung back onto his horse and wheeled it around. His men followed, and they rode out of town at a measured pace, Benson sitting straight and proud as if he had not just been run off. But Franklin knew better. They had not seen the last of Richard Benson. The moment the riders were out of sight, Abigail's knees buckled. Franklin caught her again, holding her as she shook with the aftermath of adrenaline and terror. "I am sorry," she gasped. "I should not be so weak." "You are the strongest person I know," Franklin said fiercely. "You faced him down, you did not let him take you. But he will come back, you heard him. He will get his court order, and then what? The law will be on his side." Sheriff Morrison joined them, his weathered face grim. "He is right about that. If he gets a judge to order you back, I cannot stop him." "Then what do I do?" Abigail looked between them desperately. "Where can I go? If I run again, he will just chase me again. I cannot spend the rest of my life running." Franklin made a decision in that moment, one that felt simultaneously reckless and utterly right. "Marry me." Everyone stared at him. Abigail's mouth fell open. "What? Marry me?" he repeated, the idea taking solid shape. "If you marry me, you will not be his wife anymore. He would have no legal claim on you, that is. You cannot be serious, you barely know me." "I know enough. I know you are brave and kind. I know you deserve a life free from fear. And I know that if you go back to him, he will kill you." Franklin took her hands in his, feeling how cold they were. "It does not have to be a real marriage, not at first. We can get it annulled later if you want. But right now, it is a way to keep you safe." "Franklin," Sheriff Morrison said quietly, "that is a big step." "I know what I am doing, Tom." Abigail was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this? Tie yourself to me, to my problems. You could have any woman in this territory." "I do not want any woman, I want—" He paused, realizing the truth as he spoke it. "I want you to be safe. That is all that matters right now." It was not the full truth. Over the past 5 days, something had grown between them, delicate and new but undeniable. He cared for her, about her, in a way he had never felt before. But now was not the time to burden her with declarations of feeling. She needed practical help, not complicated emotions. "There is a preacher over in Pine Grove," Martha Holloway said, stepping forward from where she had been watching with the rest of the town. "Reverend Williams. He could marry you tomorrow if you rode over." "This is crazy," Abigail whispered. But Franklin saw hope dawning in her eyes, fragile as morning light. "Maybe," he agreed. "But crazy might be the only thing that works." "What do you say, Abigail?" Will you marry me?" She looked at him for a long time, searching his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she slowly nodded. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." They rode out to Pine Grove at dawn the next morning, accompanied by Sheriff Morrison and Martha as witnesses. Pine Grove was barely a town, more a collection of buildings around a lumber mill, but it had a small church and Reverend Williams, a kind old man who asked no uncomfortable questions when Franklin explained they needed to be married quickly. Abigail wore the nicest dress Martha could lend her, a simple green cotton that matched her eyes. Franklin had washed and shaved, wearing his only good shirt. Standing before the reverend in that tiny church, saying vows that were meant to be a legal protection, Franklin felt the weight and sanctity of the moment settle over him. "Do you, Franklin Garrett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Abigail Brenner, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Abigail's voice wavered only slightly. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Nevada, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Franklin hesitated, not wanting to presume, but Abigail leaned up and pressed a soft, chaste kiss to his lips. It lasted only a second, but he felt it down to his boots. They signed the marriage certificate with Martha and Sheriff Morrison witnessing, making it official and legal. Abigail was now Abigail Garrett, no longer Benson, no longer bound to the man who had tormented her. The ride back to Lone Pine was quiet. Franklin kept glancing at Abigail, trying to gauge her feelings. She looked pensive, occasionally touching the simple gold band he had bought from the general store, the only ring available on short notice. "Are you all right?" he finally asked as they neared town. "I do not know," she admitted. "I went from one marriage to another in less than a week. It feels unreal." "This one is different," he said firmly. "You have a choice. You can leave whenever you want. This marriage is whatever you want it to be." "And what do you want it to be?" He considered lying, keeping things simple, but she deserved honesty. "I want whatever makes you happy and safe. Beyond that, I am hoping we can figure it out as we go." She smiled, tentative but genuine. "That sounds reasonable." They arrived back in Lone Pine to find the town buzzing with activity. News had spread about their marriage, and folks were both scandalized and impressed by the speed of it. Martha had prepared a small celebration at the hotel, nothing fancy but heartfelt. There was food and music, and people came by to offer congratulations and welcome Abigail to their community. Franklin had arranged for a small house on the edge of town, a place he had been saving for anyway. It was modest, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was clean and private. That night, as they stood in the house that was now their home, the reality of their situation settled awkwardly between them. "I will sleep on the floor," Franklin offered immediately. "You take the bed. Franklin, this is your house. It is our house now. And I am not going to make you uncomfortable." Abigail looked at him, something complicated in her expression. "You really mean all this, do not you, about giving me choice?" "Of course. Richard never gave me a choice about anything. What I wore, what I ate, when I slept. Everything was controlled." She wrapped her arms around herself. "It is strange, having freedom. I do not quite know what to do with it." "You will learn," Franklin said gently. "We both will." They worked out a routine over the following days. Franklin continued his jobs around town while Abigail helped Martha at the hotel. In the evenings, they would have dinner together, conversation gradually becoming easier and more natural. Franklin learned that Abigail had a quick wit and a love of bad jokes. Abigail learned that Franklin sang to himself while working, usually off-key but with enthusiasm. 2 weeks after their wedding, they were having dinner when Abigail said, I think I am starting to understand something. What is that? What a real marriage could be like. Partnership instead of ownership, respect instead of control. She looked down at her plate. What it is like to be treated as an equal. Franklin reached across the table and took her hand. You are more than my equal, Abigail. You are braver than I will ever be. She laced her fingers through his, and something shifted again, that delicate thread between them strengthening. They sat like that for a while, hands clasped, both aware that their arrangement was becoming something more. The threat of Richard Benson hung over them like a storm cloud, always present but not yet breaking. Sheriff Morrison had sent word to contacts in Virginia City and Carson City, trying to learn if Benson was pursuing legal action. The response came a month after the wedding. Benson had filed for annulment of his marriage to Abigail, citing abandonment, but he had not yet discovered that she had remarried. It is only a matter of time, the sheriff told Franklin privately. When he finds out about you two, he is going to come back, and he will be even angrier. Let him come, Franklin said. She is my wife now, legally and properly. He has no claim on her. That might not stop him from trying something. Men like Benson do not take loss well. Franklin knew the sheriff was right. He started carrying his gun everywhere and made sure Abigail continued her shooting practice. She had improved significantly, able to hit targets with reasonable accuracy. More importantly, she no longer flinched when pulling the trigger. It was on a cool October evening, 2 months after their wedding, that everything came to a head. Franklin was walking home from the livery stable, his mind on what to make for dinner, when he heard the thunder of approaching horses. His heart sank. He knew that sound, knew what it meant. He broke into a run, racing toward home. Abigail was there alone, and if Benson had come back, he rounded the corner and saw them. 6 riders again, Benson in the lead, pulling up in front of Franklin's house. Benson was off his horse before it fully stopped, striding toward the door with deadly purpose. Abigail, Benson roared, pounding on the door. I know you are in there. Open this door right now. Franklin ran faster, his lungs burning. He was still 50 yards away when the door opened. Abigail stood in the doorway, and Franklin's heart stopped. She was not cowering, was not backing away. She held his revolver in both hands, pointed directly at Benson's chest. Leave, she said, her voice steady as stone. You have no business here. Benson actually laughed. Put that gun down before you hurt yourself. You do not have the courage to pull that trigger. I left you, did I not? That took courage. This would be easy by comparison. Franklin reached them, breathing hard, positioning himself beside Abigail. You heard my wife. Leave. Your wife. Benson's face went purple with rage. That is rich. You think some backwoods marriage is going to stop me? I will have it annulled. I will drag her back to Virginia City, and you will do nothing. Sheriff Morrison's voice cut through the night. He emerged from the shadows with both deputies, all armed. Richard Benson, I am placing you under arrest. On what charge? Benson sputtered. Threatening behavior, disturbing the peace, and I am sure we can find a few more if we look hard enough. The sheriff smiled grimly. You have been warned to stay away from this town. Yet here you are, making threats against 2 of my citizens. Benson's men shifted uneasily. Whatever loyalty they had was clearly purchased, and none of them looked eager to fight law officers over their boss's obsession. This is not over, Benson said, but his bluster was weakening. I will bring federal marshals. I will. No, you will not, came a new voice. A well-dressed man stepped forward from the crowd that had gathered. Franklin recognized him as Harold Preston, a lawyer who had moved to Lone Pine last month. Mr. Benson, I am representing Mrs. Garrett in her divorce proceedings against you. We have documented evidence of abuse, witness statements, and medical records. If you pursue this matter further, all of it will become public record. I imagine that would not be good for your reputation or business in Virginia City." Benson stared at the lawyer. "How did you? Mrs. Garrett hired me 2 weeks ago. We have been building a case." Franklin looked at Abigail in surprise. She gave him a small, apologetic shrug. "I wanted to handle it properly. Make sure he could never come after me legally again." Preston continued, "You can contest the divorce, Mr. Benson, and we will see you in court, where I will call witness after witness to describe the condition Mrs. Garrett was in when she arrived in this town. The bruises, the terror, everything you did to her. Or you can accept the divorce quietly and we can all move on with our lives." Benson looked around at the hostile faces, at the armed men, at Abigail standing firm with a gun still pointed at him. Franklin saw the moment the man realized he had lost. It was not acceptance, just calculation. Benson was figuring out that this battle would cost him more than it was worth. "Fine," he bit out. "Keep the broken thing. She was never worth the trouble anyway." He turned to leave, but Franklin had had enough. He stepped forward and his fist connected with Benson's jaw with a satisfying crack. Benson went down hard, sprawling in the dirt. "That was for every bruise you gave her," Franklin said quietly. "Every moment of fear, every tear. You are not a man. You are a coward who could only feel big by hurting someone smaller, and you will never touch her again." Benson scrambled to his feet, blood trickling from his split lip. For a moment, Franklin thought he might actually try to fight back, but Sheriff Morrison stepped between them. "I think that is enough excitement for one evening. Mr. Benson, you and your men will ride out of here now, and if you set foot in Lone Pine again, I will arrest you on sight." "That is a promise." Benson mounted his horse, his face a mask of humiliated rage, but he was beaten and he knew it. They all watched as he and his men rode away into the darkness, swallowed by the night. The moment they were out of sight, Abigail lowered the gun with shaking hands. Franklin took it from her gently before she could drop it. Then she threw her arms around him, holding tight, and he held her back just as fiercely. "Is it really over?" she whispered against his shoulder. "It is over," he confirmed. "He is gone and he is not coming back." She pulled back just far enough to look up at him, her eyes shining with tears. "You hit him." "I probably should not have," Franklin admitted, "but I do not regret it. Good, because I do not either." And then she kissed him, properly this time. Not a quick peck, but a real kiss full of relief and gratitude and something deeper. Something that had been growing between them since the day she rode into town. When they finally broke apart, the assembled townspeople burst into applause and cheers. Franklin laughed, embarrassed but happy. Abigail buried her face in his chest, her shoulders shaking with what might have been laughter or tears or both. That night, after everyone had left and they were alone in their house, Abigail said, "I hired Mr. Preston because I wanted to make sure this was done right, but also because I wanted to choose this." "Choose what?" "You. This marriage. I wanted it to be real, not just a legal protection. I wanted to know I was staying because I want to, not because I have to." Franklin's heart hammered. "And do you want to stay?" "I do." She stepped closer, taking his hands. "I love you, Franklin Garrett. I think I started loving you when you caught me that first day, when you looked at me like I was a person worth saving. And I have fallen more in love with you every day since." "Abigail," he breathed and pulled her close. "I love you too. I have been trying not to say it, trying not to pressure you, but God, I love you so much it terrifies me." "Then be terrified with me," she said with a watery laugh. "And let us figure this out together." They sealed it with another kiss, and when Franklin lifted her in his arms and carried her to their bed, it was not as strangers bound by convenience but as husband and wife in truth, choosing each other freely and fully. The divorce from Richard Benson was finalized 3 months later. True to Preston's prediction, Benson did not contest it once he realized the alternative was public humiliation. The documents arrived via mail, and Abigail burned them in the fireplace, watching her past life turn to ash. "How does it feel?" Franklin asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Like freedom," she said. "Real freedom for the first time in my life." Spring came to Lone Pine, turning the desert into a riot of wildflowers. Franklin had saved enough to buy a small ranch outside town, nothing fancy but enough land to raise horses and cattle. Abigail threw herself into making it a home, planting a garden and sewing curtains and filling the rooms with light and laughter. They worked side by side, building something together. Franklin taught Abigail to ride properly, not the desperate flight she had made before, but the easy partnership between horse and rider. Abigail taught Franklin to read better, his education having been spotty at best. In June, Abigail realized she was pregnant. She told Franklin one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "A baby." Franklin's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, joy, terror. "Are you sure?" Doc Brennan confirmed it this morning. "I am about 2 months along." He gathered her into his arms, careful now as if she might break. "Are you happy about it?" "I am terrified," she admitted. "But yes, I am happy. I never wanted children with Richard because I could not bear the thought of bringing a child into that house. But with you in this home we have built. Yes, I want this." Their son was born in February of 1883, howling his displeasure at the cold Nevada winter. They named him Jacob, and he had Franklin's dark hair and Abigail's green eyes. Franklin held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "I will protect you," he whispered to the tiny bundle. "Both of you, always." Abigail watched her husband cradle their child and thought about how far she had come. A year and a half ago she had been fleeing for her life, convinced she would never be free, never be happy. Now she was surrounded by love, watching the two most important people in her world. Over the years, their ranch prospered. They had 3 more children, a daughter named Clara, then twin boys, Michael and Thomas. The house was always loud, always full of laughter and the organized chaos of a large family. Sheriff Morrison eventually retired, and Franklin was asked to take over as sheriff of Lone Pine. He served with fairness and integrity, earning the respect of everyone in the territory. Abigail became known for her kindness, always ready to help a neighbor or take in someone who needed shelter. They never forgot where they came from, the darkness that had brought them together. It made them appreciate the light all the more. Years later, when their grandchildren would ask how they met, Abigail would smile and say, "I rode into town running from a monster, and your grandfather became my shield." "And your future," Franklin would add, taking her hand in his, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "And my future," Abigail would agree, because that was the truth of it. What had started as survival had become the greatest love story of their lives. They had chosen each other in the hardest of circumstances and had spent every day since choosing each other again. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren in the home they had built together, Franklin raised a glass. "To my wife," he said. "The bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You rode into my life and changed everything. Every day with you has been a gift." "To my husband," Abigail responded, her eyes bright with happy tears. "Who saw me when I was broken and loved me anyway. Who gave me safety and freedom and a life beyond my wildest dreams. You were my shield when I needed protection, but you became so much more. You became my home." They kissed to the sound of applause and cheers, And though they were both gray-haired and weathered by years of hard work under the Nevada sun, in that moment, they were young again. Back in that little church in Pine Grove, saying vows they did not yet understand the full meaning of, taking a leap of faith that had carried them through half a century, Franklin and Abigail Garrett lived long, full lives in Lone Pine, Nevada, surrounded by the family and community they had built. Their love story became legend in those parts, told and retold as an example of how courage and kindness can transform even the darkest beginning into the brightest future. When Franklin passed at the age of 84, Abigail held his hand, telling him she would see him soon. She followed him 6 months later, dying peacefully in her sleep surrounded by her children. They were buried side by side in the Lone Pine Cemetery, their shared headstone reading simply, Franklin and Abigail Garrett, 2 hearts, 1 choice, endless love. And that was how their story ended, not in tragedy as it so easily could have, but in triumph. The monster that had chased Abigail into Lone Pine on that dusty day in 1881 had been defeated, not just by force but by love, by community, by the simple refusal to let evil win. Their descendants still live in Nevada, carrying forward the legacy of courage and compassion that Franklin and Abigail established. The ranch is still there, passed down through generations, and on quiet evenings, locals swear they can sometimes see 2 figures on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, eternal in their love. It was a story that started with fear but ended with joy. A reminder that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes for those brave enough to keep riding toward it. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, you find someone willing to ride beside you, shielding you from the storms and sharing in the sunshine. That was the legacy of Franklin and Abigail Garrett, the cowboy and the woman who rode into town fleeing a monster. Together, they built something beautiful, something lasting, something true. They built a love that conquered fear and a family that spanned generations. They built a life worth living, and that was the greatest victory of all.